Happy New Year's, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Breaking News Podcast. As your host, Anna Morris, and also co-host Kylie Montigny, we are super excited to kick off the podcast with different topics that are happening right now around the world. Today, we thought it would be fitting to start off the first season with a topic that pertains to 2024, the presidential election. So our first topic for today is going to be the 2024 primaries. So that already passed, but we wanted to talk about the different candidates that are for the 24 election. And I think we just want to overview candidates right now in the beginning of the Republican candidates, Democratic candidates, and then also independents as well. Just kind of our thoughts over them, and also talking about the age difference, the topics and the policies that they are promoting. So let's start with maybe Joe Biden. Let's talk about him for a second.
Oh, with Joe Biden, the one and only, the 46th president of the United States of America. What can we honestly say about him to start off? Is a question I think all of America is wondering, is that what can we describe what America is in at the moment with Joe Biden and how he is as president at the moment?
Yeah, he has quite significantly low approval ratings from the American public, which is quite scary. I don't think we've ever had a president who has had that low of approval ratings, which, I mean, it's kind of a pull and tug with that one, because approval ratings isn't all that it is mustered up to be, because, I mean, a leader isn't determined by approval rating. A leader is determined by kind of the actions they lead their country with. But Biden, he's 81 years old. It's quoted on different news sites like CNN that he is already the oldest U.S. president to have ever served office.
And with Joe Biden, like, he was in the Senate and was vice president before he became the president of the United States. He was, the vice president over on Obama before Trump became president, from 2009 to 2017, and was, in the Delaware Senate from 1973 to 2009. So of course he's been around for a long time. And so with that experience, I know with a lot of American people, they would want a president that is experienced in politics rather than someone coming into our country and being the president of the United States. I know, personally speaking, I wanted to have someone that has experience rather than none. And with Joe Biden, I know, like we were discussing earlier, like I know with a lot of, people, they want a president that has, a decent age, not too old, not too young, that has experience and knowledge to different extent. I mean, I know with Joe Biden, he's 81 years old. He was born back in 1942, back in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I know, like he only lived for so long. I think for a couple of years, and he moved to Delaware and, that sort of thing. But I know with a lot of people, they would much rather probably have someone like a young candidate, maybe like Nikki Haley or Vivek Ramsey or some of those young candidates that are running, to rather than having a candidate that's in his 80s and has a low approval rating than what we have right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to piggyback off of that, because I love what you said about experience, because he has been in politics probably kind of his whole career. He's been a vice president. He's been advisors to people. But I think one of the things that might just kind of like dip him in this election might be the economic factor, which is, I think, a lot of Americans are looking at. They are looking at inflation hitting the 40-year highs in 2022, the cost of food, the cost of gas, things like that. That's really
Mhm.
important to the American public. So I think that might just be kind of one of those things that is hard for people to reelect
Mhm.
him if something he's willing to change. Um, but again, he does have experience. I think a lot of people do have different opinions on him, which is perfectly fine. That's why we have elections in the United States.
Mhm.
But along with that, another thing that I also personally have concerns about is different borders being open.
Mhm.
We've seen the Ukraine crisis with the Russia-Ukraine war and also what's happened with Israel, which kind of keeps the United States at a vulnerable spot, just
Mhm.
because our less constricting with our borders. So I think just the idea of national safety, national security with that,
Mhm.
I think that also weighs in on voters.
Yeah, 100%. Like to way back, and also with everything you said, it reminds me of everything that is going on right now in the Mexico border. I know with the Mexico border into the United States, there's a lot of thousands of immigrants coming into the United States on a daily basis. And that wasn't, the case when Donald Trump was president. Of course, we had a closed border, we had a border, like, that sort of thing. But also, once Joe Biden became president, it really, there's more. It really set a big record high to how many illegal immigrants coming from Mexico into the United States into the Texas border, and a lot of these illegal immigrants usually go to like Los Angeles, California, New York, Florida at some points. They go over the country. And so with
Right.
having these immigrants, a lot of thousands of immigrants are coming into the United States from Mexico through that border in Mexico and into Texas, the United States. And it is at a record high than it was years ago when Donald Trump was president rather than now. Like if you can look at these statics and how many people are coming in, it's like bigger than I've seen it in a long time. It's crazy.
Hmm. I like that you brought that up because I think it was one of my first episodes on my podcast that I talked about the Mexico border specifically. And this was during Trump's presidency, where he was trying to constrict that a little bit more than most candidates we've seen. Um, and just kind of weighing the pros and cons factor of that, of different families being separated and what that kind of looks like. And then also just the problem of even if we don't allow them into our borders, what will it look like and how dangerous is it for people to cross illegally, and financial and safety obligations does that have on our border security officers, because it's one of the most treacherous jobs in the world to be a border security agent.
Mhm.
And I think that under different presidencies, that can look very different.
And I feel like that is really like a big major factor in what 2024 election is really all about. Because of course with the 2024 elections, with Trump being kicked off the ballot in Colorado and just recently announced yesterday or the day before in Maine. And so now it's really up to the
Mhm.
Supreme Court to really kick Trump off the ballot to prevent him from going into the primaries, being president. Because I know a lot of people do not stand Trump, which is understandable. Everyone has their own opinions. He does some things. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone, that's part of life. And so with the balance of border security, it's really important to really hear from different candidates and Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Like it's really important to really discuss people's intakes on the border. I know with closed borders, open borders, whatever. Like, you're more welcome to have their opinions, especially with thousands of immigrants. I saw something about having a illegal immigrants vote in the 2024 election, I believe. I could be wrong, but I did see something that was like, oh, illegal immigrants can't vote in the elections. Now, and like, I kind of would love to hear. I'm sure many people as well can hear, these type of opinions on people crossing our border.
Oh, absolutely. Those questions that you bring up are so valid, because as Americans, we are so accustomed to free and fair elections. That's kind of what sets America apart from the rest of the world. And so those questions that you brought up of like, okay, there's these illegal immigrants who don't even have citizenship and they're able to vote for a president that they're in a country that they don't necessarily belong to, which a lot of people will argue back of like, okay, well, America is full of immigrants. Like, we all came from different countries, which is true. But to maintain our national sovereignty as a country, I think it's very important that we do have free and fair elections. And so one of those things being, and I know you probably agree with this, is that, okay, we can't take presidential candidates off a ballot. And I know that a lot of people will be like, okay, it's up to the state Supreme Court. Yes, it is. But it's also other candidates, like people in Congress, our representatives for each state. It's their responsibility to be the voice for each of these states and be like, okay, this is wrong. Even if this is what we are, quote unquote, feeling, this might not be exactly legal. And so what concerns me the most with taking Trump off the ballot in Colorado and then being put back on by the Supreme Court and then also taken off in Maine, and we still kind of are being updated about Maine, is that there's this possibility where we have a lot of kind of national unrest, if that makes sense, and kind of this like side against side. And we've seen this. I mean, Kylie and I were talking about the Ukraine war and talking about just what has happened with Israel and Hamas. There's kind of this unsettling throughout the world. And so I think it's kind of making voters anxious of like, okay, what is happening in the United States? Why can't we vote for the candidate that we choose? And things like that. But going back to kind of those like main topics of like the economic crisis that we're going through right now, and sort of kind of slipping into a little bit of a depression of like, okay, can we afford gas? Can we afford food? It's not a lot, but it's just that kind of idea of like, okay, it's more expensive than it has been. And then also border security, national security, things like abortion rights, and just all of those concerns. Kylie, what is your thoughts throughout kind of each candidate? Like, I know you were talking about Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, and he's like banned things from Instagram about misinformation about the COVID vaccine. These things are very interesting. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, with like the whole Republican well, in terms of the Republican nominees, there's obviously a lot of good options on this ballot, like Nikki Haley, Viv Ramsey, Ron DeSantis, Chris Kittle and Donald Trump, of course. But with all those candidates, they all have different feelings on certain topics. Like with Nikki Haley, her husband's in the military. She was in the UN. She was governor of South Carolina. She has experience. And with having her husband in the military, of course, honoring veterans is important to her. As with having people in your military, it can really hit close to home for some people. And so I really support Nikki Haley on her views, like with everything she's doing. But with Chris Criddle, I feel like with every time he gets asked to speak, I feel like every time he is talking about, different things at the debates and everything. I feel like with everything he's saying, he's always mentioning or killing Donald Trump based off every sentence. And that's why I kind of noticed that he's like damaging Donald Trump every like sentence or question. Like there's always a little bit of Donald Trump. But with also with every candidate, they all have different experiences. But with Vivek Ramsey, I feel like he's a very good candidate, don't get me wrong. But I feel like he doesn't have that much experience in politics to really know how to run a country. Like, of course, with him being a businessman, like that helps, with business, working with other countries, that sort of thing in terms of deals, different stuff, things that you need to run a country. But I feel like he might not have as much experience to compare with other candidates like Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, some of those candidates. And I know when Donald Trump ran back in 2016, he was basically not nobody, but he was more like a businessman that has his own empire of hotels, golf courses, Mar-a-Lago, like that type of thing. He was more of a businessman than politics. So when the election came around in 2016, it really surprised a lot of people when he ran for president and ended up winning because, of course, when the election was happening, Hillary Clinton was favored to win. Her husband was the former president of the United States. They were involved in politics for a long time. Everyone thought, Hillary Clinton was going to win. But it really did surprise a lot of people when Trump joined in and won the election. That surprised a lot of people because, of course, he doesn't have a lot of politics experience. He's more a businessman working for deals than a person to be president. It's something that you don't see very often. And so with Donald Trump, I feel like with Vivek Ramsey, like it reminds me of Donald Trump when he ran back here in 2016 with his experience. Even though he does have great value to what he wants to bring, I feel like he's just not has a lot much experience, compared to some other people like Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that concerns me for Nikki Haley as a Republican candidate is the Republican Party is looking for a candidate who kind of molds their values. And one of those things that I think that she's kind of put her own blueprint on is the abortions right issue. She had kind of a very rocky commitment to either side, and I don't think that's very stable for voters to look at and to support, because that is a huge issue right now with Roe versus Wade being overturned and different states kind of choosing what they are going to place as their legislation for that issue. I just think that's one of her things that might get her when it comes to voting. But she does overall have a lot of experience. Like you said, she was a UN representative and things like that. And again, like I said, that he's 38, and that does bring up the question of, okay, how much experience does he have, like you said? And that's very interesting to kind of go into. He is very intelligent, very scrappy when it comes to discussions. He doesn't want to kind of alarm anyone. He wants to have a physical discussion, which I can appreciate. At the time, like you said, kind of lost a little experience, but who knows? He kind of mirrors the image of Donald Trump back in 2016, where he is a businessman. He doesn't really have politics, which could be a good thing, and not getting swayed by different decisions that he has to make. But I want to talk a little bit about a few more Democratic candidates, like Dean Phillips. He was a U.S. congressman in Minnesota, and he announced in October that he wanted to do this to kind of run alongside kind of Biden. because they don't have a lot of control, which I'm kind of sad to see. I think Republican kind of step up to the plate in that sense, where they have a lot of different ones, but it's the voters' responsibility to come with, okay, who is going to be the best at what they do. But yeah, the only ones is like Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, Joe Biden. And I think that a lot of them are going towards the go green type, things like that. I know that Dean Williams, he's the millionaire businessman, so another businessman. And back to Chris Christie on the Republican side, it's hard because he has the 2% poll from the last time people took about like what things are going to look like during the election. But I have to agree with you that he seems really bitter about the idea of Trump running again. He's very interested again in the January 6th, which our country's kind of been through a lot when it comes to January 6th. And those different like legislations that happen, different trying to warrant for arrest, different things like that. So I think the American people are a little bit over it. And it's just interesting to see that he's still holding on to that.
I know. A guy like with him, with Chris, like he has, a lot of opinions, like supporting, the United States aid to Ukraine, but is not looking to send troops all over the world to fight in the Ukraine and Russia war. Of course, with the United States, they had provided Ukraine with a bunch of money, fighting weapons and everything. But it feels like with a lot of people, from what I've seen, we spend more time aiding Ukraine and the Iran and Hamas war than we use on our own country, which is, very, crazy to think. It seems like that's happening and providing for our allies more than our actual country and our need. First, with gas prices and everything that's going on in our country right now, and all the protests going on with the war. There's a bunch of them going on in New York City. With everything going on, it really has provided like people's opinions. And with supporting providing for Ukraine, it really, with Ukraine and Russia is such a big country that it's one of the most powerful countries in the world, like probably the most powerful country in the world with the United States, with how much powerful it is with all the weapons. And so with all these things going on, with providing donations to different countries where the war is going on, with Chris Christie, like I feel like he's not much powerful enough to handle all these experiences. Of course, compared to Ron DeSantis and stuff. When I heard a lot of opinions saying if Donald Trump was president, he probably wouldn't. The war going on right now in Israel and a war going on in Ukraine, the war probably wouldn't be going on if Donald Trump was in office. And that's the thing people really have been saying over the last about 2 years since the wars has started, is that there's a lot of opinions saying, okay, Donald Trump is really, like, once he left office, the country really just went into a swamp. Like it really just declined. And things have took a different turn than it was, since 2020. Once the election happened, of course, there were a bunch of, election things going on, election fraud, that sort of just. But really, is the correct answer is trying to find the actual, president be in charge of everything. Of course, when Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramsey and of course Tim Scott, like a lot of people do have feelings about the opinions, but some people like, Vivek Ramsey or Tim Scott or Nikki Haley might be better off for, vice president role, maybe under Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, rather than actually being president. rather than running the world and being the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah, they could work as really great vice presidents for candidates like Trump, Ron DeSantis. I think those are the two primary, very big shot of winning. They're very close to each other in terms of what they promote and the policies they want to continue to create in America versus kind of Joe Biden being the leading candidate for the Democratic Party. So that's just what the 2024 election looks like. I think it's going to be very fascinating to see what that folds out to look like for the American people. But again, I just want to encourage that being in unity with each other, even if we do think differently, is such a big deal, because while we look around our world and we see that people are attacking each other, I think it's so important, especially in an election year, to try to have difficult conversations with each other and try to understand each other's points when it comes to that. One of the last things we wanted to talk about on this episode is kind of what it looks like for new voters that are coming in. I will be a new voter for the 2024 election, and it's laying on the side of Gen Zers and also kind of millennials, I think, like mid millennials who are voting, and people are just kind of seeing like the difference in voting technique. Do you want to kind of talk about that, Kylie?
Yeah, sure. So with Gen Z, there's so many new eligible voters to be eligible to vote in 2024, including me, and Ann are going to be able to vote next year. This is a big election for Gen Z, and there's going to be about 41 million members of Gen Z that will be eligible to vote in 2024, which is actually amazing. But it's a matter of how many Gen Z people are going to actually vote in the election. Of course, with 4 million people, that's a lot of people, Gen Z, to be voting. And I know a lot of people, it's very important to have, a lot, like Gen Z, to have a say in what we are going to have in running our country. Of course, and plus, not a lot of people really are into politics. And so with the Gen Z people, it really is, something people should probably take more seriously than before about what's going on. And with having Gen Z, I know a lot of people, but a lot of people want to get Gen Z people involved and have a say and to kind of get their opinions on different variety of things, whether it's like gas prices, inflation, economic crisis, different things are going on. And to really have kind of a say for Gen Z is really just having that voice and really just having Gen Z to come and vote and be like, okay, like we can have a voice, let's use it. Because I know a lot of people are afraid to use a voice. So I feel like in 2024, I think that will be kind of like the year of Gen Z really coming together to kind of really just, go out and vote and really have a say in this year, coming election.
Yeah, I agree with that. And overpriced gas prices. And I saw in an NPR interview that Gen Z is one of the most passionate about the Hamas war, which I think is very interesting to look at. I think that it's interesting to look at all the pro-Palestine protests that are going on, like you said, in New York City and across the nation. I was currently in New Mexico for vacation, and we crossed one of the universities there, and there was a huge pro-Palestine just kind of congregation protesting against it. And some of the things that they say and they do, I personally don't understand. But I think it's very important to look at as the American public and see kind of why is Gen Z so adamant about protesting for this war and against different sides of the war. But I think we talked about that pretty well, that Gen Z is going to step up to the plate. I think one of the things that might be interesting to see is if Christian and those of faith step up to the ballot, because I think a lot of times they are strong voters, but they don't necessarily show up for voting because they are scared that their vote won't matter. Like we both said, kind of with illegal immigrants coming across the border, what is it going to look like with their votes being cast? Is it going to be an unfair election that we saw back in 2020? It's just kind of something we have to see that's going to play out. But I think I personally am excited to just continue to see what these candidates have to offer, how people are reacting to it. But I think it's just kind of up in the air. But a lot of the things that are solidified are the candidates, what they propose for legislation, what they want for policies. I think that's very set in stone. I think what is yet to come is kind of seeing where voters look and where they are continuing to go into 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you're so right. Like with everything going on with Gen Z, protesting at different colleges like NYU, George Washington, there's a bunch of protests going on around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a sign on how much the Gen Z wants to get involved and have a say. Even
Mm-hmm.
though everyone might not agree about a certain topic that's going on today as well, but it's always great to see how young voters are getting involved and actually in really just paying attention to what's going on and what's going on in today's society,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very good sign. It really shows how much people really care about our country and how our world works. And basically, with having up to say in our politics that's going on is really important because, of course, if you use your voice, that really helps to make our country better and make a better life for ourselves. Because I know with a lot of people, they come to our country to live a better life. Like everyone wants to live the American dream. That's what it's all about. And so with having voting like elections, I know with having an election right, a lot of people think, oh, it's not
Mm-hmm.
important, like my vote doesn't matter. But it really is more important than you can ever imagine. Like, because you're voted, you're making a difference today, the election day, than you did a couple of days ago when you didn't vote yet. So
Mm-hmm.
really with voting, it really is one of the best duties you can do as a citizen. It really could really make you feel so good about making a difference. Even though if you might get judged for voting for this candidate, like you might not win, or you might you just feel embarrassed. Like, as long as you really just vote for what you believe in, I know it might be hard to share about what you believe in, and that's okay. I've been there. I still am dealing with that. I'm sure everyone deals with it in some way. Everyone has different opinions, but as long as you really vote and have a say in what you believe in, especially Gen Z, it really shows what our country is paving our way for.
Yeah, it couldn't have been said better. You did a great job. And Kylie and I are just so excited. This is our first episode. We're both excited to continue this journey with you guys as listeners. And we probably are going to do some like Instagram, Facebook polls that kind of lets us know what you want to listen to and kind of give us some feedback. I know we do it through Spotify for podcasters, so that gives you as the listener an opportunity to give us feedback on kind of what we should highlight more, some things that we can improve on, and we are so happy that you are listeners.
We are so happy to be able to start this podcast. It's really been, a very kind of long time coming. Me and Anna have been working together closely over the last couple of months to come to film this and create this. And I'm super happy this has come to life. And basically, make sure to stay tuned with us, stay up to date with everything. And if you want to give us ideas or even guest ideas, we're always looking to have guests on. We are always looking to have on the podcast to get their ideas and learn and help educate everyone about different topics. So if you have any guest recommendations or topics you want us to discuss, feel free to let us know. We'll be happy to hear everything you have in mind. We're always looking for new ideas. So we really, appreciate, everyone listening. We love you guys so much and happy new year to everyone listening. 2024 is going to be a great year. A big one coming though, was to say, but it's going to be a great year. A new president may be coming. This is really a big year for us to, fight for what we believe in. So it's really, exciting to see what we have, planned.